Hi, my name is Dr. Noah Bressman. I'm an assistant professor of physiology at Salisbury University. And I'm going to tell you about a pretty weird project I've got for you about the effective terrestrial walking behavior of Arapaima, one of the world's largest freshwater fishes. Now, a variety of fish come onto land for a variety of reasons. You have things like tide pool sculpins and mummy chugs that will move over land between tide pools as the tide pool dries up. So the northern snakehead that will emerge from a body of water if the water quality is poor in search of better quality water. And things like the American eel that will move over land uh, to go around migration obstacles up and down rivers. But while there's a huge diversity of fish that go onto land for a variety of reasons, they have some things in common, particularly that many of them are elongate and many of them are very small. So most amphibious fishes seem to be elongate. Look at the eel catfish, the American eel, the biker, killifish, snakehead. All of them are very long bodies and relatively shallow bodies. And this could perhaps be the result of gravity, as proposed by Kuznetsov in 2021. They proposed that the fish, amphibious fish, may not be able to get more than 20 centimeters in height, because any larger than that, the vertical gravitational force on their different parts of their body may be too large to overcome. So if you have a really deep bodied fish, you have more weight per length of body weighing down on the fish, which could cause internal damage or difficulties with locomotion. Now, elongation could also be the result of a biomechanical advantage. Um, by having more length relative to your overall mass and depth, you will have more surface area for propulsion to move against the ground, especially if you're using axial or axial appendage-based terrestrial locomotion. For example, if you were to imagine just a normal snake, it could slither just fine on land. But if you had a snake that was the shape of a can of beans, it probably would not be able to slither that well just because it doesn't have much propulsive area. Now, many amphibious fish are also very small. Look at these killifish, sculpins, blennies, silver sides, and hill stream loaches. They're all very small, several centimeters in length at most. And this can be a matter of the scaling of dimensions. So as an animal grows larger, its volume grows proportionate to its length to the third power, and so does its mass, whereas the cross-sectional muscle area grows to the second power. So the muscle force used to help these fish move around on land grows less quickly than their overall weight. So it may reach larger sizes, they may not be able to support their weight on land or be able to move their bodies on land, especially on relatively flimsy fin rays. But there are some other larger fish species that can move over land, such as loricariid catfishes, also known as plecos, eels, lungfishes, and snakeheads, particularly from the genus Chana. Now, snakeheads are a group of fish that I studied, particularly the northern snakehead, and they can grow to about 10 kilograms, but the largest individual I actually got my hands on was 5 kilograms, and that was able to move over land using a form of axial appendage-based terrestrial locomotion. Now, snakeheads were thought to be the largest amphibious fish to move around on land, and some species can get to 20 kilograms as well. Snakeheads move on land using a form of axial appendage-based terrestrial locomotion where they use their pectoral fins in combination with their axial body. And this is similar to what the tide pool sculpin does, where you can see it's using its pectoral fins and axial body. But there's two key differences. One is that the snakehead is several kilograms and the sculpin is several grams. And so this scaling difference, this multiple orders of magnitude in mass difference, may cause the snakeheads to be too large to be able to lift their center mass off the substrate like the tide pool sculpin does. And because of that, the snakehead may have to just drag its body along the substrate. Now, because of this, I thought that a fish much larger would not be able to support its weight on its pectoral fins and may not be able to move well on the ground. But that's when my cousin sent me this video of an Arapaima moving around on land. Now, Arapaima are obligate air-breathing fish, so they can breathe air through their highly vascularized swim bladder and effectively exchange gases. They frequently inhabit floodplains that can get flooded, then they'll swim out over in shallow water, and then as flood water recedes, they could potentially be stranded on land. And now watch, as this fish is released by these two people, you can see it's using a form of axial appendage-based terrestrial locomotion using its pectoral fins and perhaps its pelvic fins, along with movements of its axial body. Now, right about here, you can see the kinematics transition to a lower amplitude swimming behavior, suggesting that they're doing something kinematically different on land rather than just trying to swim around on land. Additionally, Arapaima have pretty thick scales, and that may help protect them from the terrestrial substrates and prevent desiccation, similar to how plecos move around on land. And so I wanted to learn more about this video, particularly what was happening. So I dug down into my internet detective skills and tried to learn more about the video. So this video was originally posted to liveleak.com by a user named Dane Ramage. Now, bear with me. This video was entitled, "This Arapaima was found walking 1 kilometer from the river." Now, if this was true, this would tie the record for the longest distance traveled by an amphibious fish of the walking catfish. However, by a user named Dane Ramage, I'm not sure if I could trust their information on that title. Additionally, I don't know what happened before or after this video. All I can really comment on is what happened during the video. And if things weren't a little sketchy enough about Dane Ramage, they were removed from liveleak.com for violating the user agreement. And then LiveLeak overall just ended as a website. And fortunate that I recorded the video beforehand as a screen grab, just in case something like this were to ever happen. So I had something to work with, because this is such a unique behavior. And while Dane Ramage may not be a reliable source, I have no reason to believe that the video is doctored in any way. So I started looking in multiple different languages to learn more about the Arapaima, doing Google searches and Google Translate. And I also used screen grabs and screen grabs from the video for reverse image searches to try to learn more or see more copies of the video. And overall, I found a couple websites that posted these videos, some of which are no longer still active. But many of these were either in Chinese or in Portuguese. And after doing translations of these web pages, I couldn't find any useful information. I did find a couple instances where these videos were posted to Facebook, but it was all the same video. And I reached out to the owners of those Facebook pages, and they reached back and said they were not the ones who took the video, nor did they recall where they got the video from. So then I thought maybe I can get my hands on Arapaima and do some actual experiments. However, this was at the beginning of the pandemic, when people were unable to go access the labs, or it was difficult to work in physical institutions. And also, most of the places that have Arapaima are aquariums that may not want to risk damaging some of their more valuable fish. Now, I could buy an Arapaima, but in some parts of the region, they are protected or endangered. And in many states, they're illegal to import. And so I wasn't sure if I could ethically get my hands on an Arapaima as well. So I had to work with this video and analyze it as is. I did a qualitative video analysis to describe the kinematics of what I could observe. And I used ImageJ for a quantitative analysis to use the body length to determine relative metrics like relative velocity and relative distance covered over land. I also performed a literature review to learn more about the Arapaima and anything else that I could learn regarding this behavior. I found a paper by Medalski from 1957 that really aided in my size estimates using, they had all sorts of different size measurements of Arapaima from a variety of sizes. I combined that with an assumption that the people in the video were average height males of about 1.76 meters. And overall, using that information, I was able to estimate this Arapaima to be 1.6 meters in length, 75 centimeters in girth, 25 centimeters tall, and 50 kilograms in mass. Here you can see the Arapaima is using a form of axial appendage-based terrestrial locomotion using its pectoral fins and axial body. It's planting a pectoral fin and rotating around that planting pectoral fin, moving its head towards that fin. Meanwhile, it's moving its tail through the midline of its body towards the fin as well. That is very similar to how the sculpin also moves around on land, the tide pool sculpin. You can see it plants its fins, moves its tail, and it does a very similar behavior. And so that perhaps this is a good model for what the Arapaima is doing. with most of the propulsive force coming from the axial body and tail, but using the pectoral fins as alternating pivot points to move forward, similar to how you move a large piece of furniture, alternatingly tilting it around the different legs to get it forward. Now, also note that the pelvic fins may also be playing a role in terrestrial locomotion. You can see they seem to be coordinated with the pectoral fins and the axial body, but the pelvic girdle is not attached to the axial skeleton of the snakeheads, Arapaima, and so they may not be able to provide much propulsion. And this could be a passive movement rather than active movement. So I'm not sure of their role yet. I would need further experiments on actual Arapaima to figure out what's going on with those pelvic fins. But they seem to be aiding these fish in perhaps being more stable on land, helping them remain upright despite their cylindrical circular cross section. Now, overall, this provides some insight into the evolutionary water to land transition, because many of the early amphibious fishes like Ichthyostega and Tiktaalik were very large. Ichthyostega is thought to get to about 1.5 meters long, which is very similar to the fish in this video. And Tiktaalik can get to about 2.5 meters long. And the overall maximum size that Arapaima can reach is about 3 meters long and about 200 kilograms, suggesting that Arapaima could be a good model of how Tiktaalik and other large amphibious fishes moved on land. This also suggests that is there really a size limit for how large a fish can be to move around on land? If one of the largest fishes in the world can move very well over land, then perhaps there's just a behavioral or a body shape limit on how they move around on land. And this fish is taller than predicted by Kuznetsov. Remember, they predicted that a fish could be no taller than about 20 centimeters on land. Meanwhile, this Arapaima is probably about 25 centimeters, and larger Arapaima can be about 40 centimeters in height. And this could be, this shows that these fish can get larger than previously thought. But remember, this fish is still pretty elongate. So this may still hold true that fish are generally elongate and with a shallow body depth. And so perhaps long-term, a deep-bodied fish that may not be able to survive on land, or even as deep as Arapaima. But over the short term, there may not be enough time for damage and stress to accumulate to causing any lasting damage, allowing these fish to avoid any damage simply by doing short-term excursions onto land. The pectoral fins of Arapaima are very well ossified. You can see in the CT scan, and they also have an enlarged first pectoral fin ray, and both of these may help in supporting their weight through terrestrial locomotion. And in a study I'm currently working on sculpin pectoral fin ossification, it seems that having more well-ossified pectoral girdle and pectoral fins may help support weight out of water and improve terrestrial locomotion. However, these fish have no obvious morphological adaptations for terrestrial locomotion. You're not going to see an Arapaima fossil and be like, bam, that fish can totally move on land. It looks pretty normal fishy-like. And so without really any obvious morphological adaptations that like mud skipper fins or Tiktaalik forelimbs or tetrapod-like lobe fins, this all supports the conclusions of the Sculpin paper I published in 2018 that suggested that amphibious behavior is likely evolutionary preceded morphological adaptations. Now, once these behaviors were created, once these behaviors arise evolutionarily, they may have then created selective pressure for morphological adaptations to improve those behaviors. And so the transition from water to land may have evolved millions of years before we previously thought, just because there were no obviously morphological adaptations for on land, despite some fish still going onto land. Now, overall, I'm not trying to pose this project as a highly quantitative study of how Arapaima move around on land. I'm really just trying to say that they can move on land pretty well, and they are huge, which changes what we know about the scaling of amphibious fishes and amphibious vertebrates in general. Also, if you have an Arapaima I would love to collaborate and borrow your Arapaima or work with you on this to get some actual data and do some experimentation to really figure out what the Arapaima are doing on land. Lastly, with a lot of things closed down, a lot of labs shut down, and a lot of difficulty getting access to data, this project shows that using social media and open source data are a valuable tool to help make science more accessible, even in non-pandemic times. I've used them, social media and open source data for various other projects, and they're very helpful in describing new behaviors and collecting natural history information. So who knows when, how many other behaviors are out there on YouTube that nobody's described yet because the right person hasn't seen the right video yet. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge everyone and everything that made this possible. It's kind of unusual, but I'll thank my cousin, Alex Ritter, for sending me the video. None of that. I really just have to thank the internet, time in isolation when I was doing this project pretty much entirely in quarantine and was around nobody else but my lovely fiance, Alicia Miller. I had nothing to do except focus on this project. And because of all that time in isolation, I watched this video a lot of times. I also have to thank fish because they're awesome, and without them, I would have nothing to study. And please follow me at Noah with Fish on social media. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have if you put them in the chat. Take care.